Hello everybody, I'm Miss Jessica from EVPL McCullough, and today we are continuing our Chapter Book Storytime Variety Pack. So we are reading a lot of different books, and we're introducing just the first couple of chapters to spark your interest, and maybe you can find your next great book that you're going to be reading. So last time we were together, we spun our wheel and we landed on historical fiction. Now, historical fiction will tend to revolve around some type of historical event that has happened, and a lot of times it will be something that has changed the course of history. So you will see stories that have been written possibly during the Renaissance or medieval times. There are stories definitely written during the founding of our country, during our time period of slavery. You'll see stories set in World War II. You'll also see a lot during the civil rights movement of our country. So I was actually very, very taken aback and had to pause when I saw a book that was set in the year 2001, because to me, that did not actually seem historical at first. But then I really thought about it and thought, well, it is a part of my history. And for a lot of you that might be reading this or listening to our story time, it may have been something that you were not even born yet to experience. So I will go ahead and pause right here and just say that we are going to be talking about a very, very significant moment in history that is still very, very close to a lot of us, and we remember it. And it does involve a lot of tragedy. So if this is something that might be a little too serious, that is totally okay. You can pause this and join us next time for our next book. Grown-ups, if you want to preview this before sharing it with your child, that is totally okay too, because like I said, this is going to be a very serious subject today. So the book that I chose is 9/10, a September 11th story. And this is by Nora Raleigh Baskin. Now, September 11th is into the year 2001, is a day that a lot of grown-ups will remember extremely well. I feel like there's always a moment in your lifetime that you will remember exactly where you were, what was happening that day, and you'll remember all the details. For my parents and my grandparents, they will tell me stories about different events, but the one that always comes up is when our president, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated, and they can remember all the details from that day and have a lot of significant memories about it. Definitely for my generation, I feel like this is the date that we can all remember. I remember it extremely clearly. I can remember all the details and a lot of things that happened, the little tiny things that happened on that day and then the days following. So in the year 2001, which is about 20 years ago this year, on September 11th, we had a huge tragedy happen in our country. So a very brief overview is that we had some terrorists hijack airplanes. Two of those airplanes were flown to New York City and were flown into the two main towers of the World Trade Center. And it's because these towers were very significant, were definitely symbolic of New York City, but also had a lot of people in them and were kind of situated in an area that was very, very populated in New York City. So they were intending to cause a lot of damage and a lot of death, and it did. A third plane was flown to Washington, D.C. and flown into the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon is where we have a lot of our national defense, and so they were intending to hurt that branch of our government, of our military, and to, really cause a lot of damage in that area. The fourth plane, we can only speculate where they were headed. The passengers of that plane were able to find out what was happening around the country, and their plane had been taken over by terrorists, and so they were able to overpower those hijackers, and in the process of that, the hijackers crashed the plane into a field in Pennsylvania. So everybody on that plane perished and they sacrificed their lives. Sorry, this is one of those topics that still 20 years later really gets to me. So they were able to make it so that a lot of other people did not experience a huge tragedy, did not die, did not lose their lives because of what they did that day. Excuse me. So, as you can see, I'm very emotional about this, and that is what is great about historical fiction, is because it will take you to those time periods and make you a part of it. But it's also great for starting conversations. Talk to your grown-ups. What do they remember from that day? It definitely changed a lot in my life, and I can, pinpoint where some things may have gone differently if this did not happen. So talk about historical events with your grown-ups. What changed their life? What do they remember from their childhood? And even ask your grandparents or older family members and friends, what do they remember in their lifetime? So this can actually start a lot of conversations with your friends and family, and then can actually go to you too. Pay attention to the news, pay attention to the world. What do you notice? What is something that you're going to remember as you grow up and want to possibly pass on to either your children or friends and family as you get older? All right, so I'm going to read the inside cover, and it says, "Ask anyone. September 11th, 2001 was serene and lovely, a perfect day. Until 8:46 a.m. when a plane struck the World Trade Center. But that hasn't happened yet. Right now, it is a few days earlier, and 4 kids in different parts of the country are going about their lives. Sergio, who lives in Brooklyn, is struggling to come to terms with the absentee father he hates and the grandmother he loves. Will's father is gone too, killed in a car accident that has left the family reeling. Nahid has never before felt uncomfortable about being Muslim, but at her new school, she's getting funny looks because of the headscarf she wears. Amy is starting a new school in a new city and missing her mom, who has to fly to New York on business. These 4 don't know one another, but their lives are about to intersect in ways they never could have imagined." All right, so let's begin our story. Everyone will mention the same thing, and if they don't when you ask them, they will remember it was a perfect day. I'm so sorry, I have to get a drink really quick. More than 8 million people lived in New York City that year, so of course not everyone's day started perfectly. There was excitement and pain, anxiety and boredom, love and loneliness, anger and joy. But everyone who looked up that morning must have marveled, whether noting it out loud or not. What a perfect day! The sky was robin's egg blue. There were 1 or 2 fluffy, almost decorative clouds. It was late summer warm, so the air was still and clear. Not the least bit humid. Warm the exact way you would set the temperature of the earth if you could. Clear with just enough breeze so you knew you were outside breathing fresh air. People would remember that day with all sorts of adjectives. Serene, lovely, cheerful, invigorating, peaceful, quiet, astounding, crystalline blue. Perfect. Until 8:46 a.m. when the first plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and nothing would ever be the same again. But that has not happened yet. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit back in time. September 9th, 2001, 7:46 a.m., O'Hare International Airport. It was September 9th, 2001, raining in that Chicago slow drizzled sort of way outside the windows of O'Hare International Airport. The sky was painted a particular shade of gray and leaving droplets of water on the large glass windows that looked out onto the airstrip. Sergio and another boy from New York were at the gate early for their flight home. Their university escort was sitting, eyes closed, listening to her Discman, waiting for the boys to board so she could go home. Really quick, a Discman was something that you carried around instead of an iPhone or a smartphone, and you actually played CDs in it. And yes, I did have one of those. What was the other boy's name? Sergio couldn't remember. L something or M something. For 2 days, Sergio had recognized him as simply the white boy with the red hair. Let's go see what's in the candy shop. The red-headed boy pointed to the newsstand, which was filled with everything anyone could possibly think of needing before getting onto a plane. Newspapers, magazines, headrests, paperback novels, earphones, small suitcases, cold drinks, and lots of candy. Sergio glanced over at the escort, who didn't look up. She didn't even open her eyes. Okay, Sergio said. He took one more glance around to make sure they would find their way back to their gate. Everything in the airport appeared the same. Every corner, every window, every set of plastic seats, every gate. It would be easy to get lost. Sergio made sure he would not. Then he checked the information on the board again. Flight 563 JFK. On time, gate 10. His grandmother would be getting up right about now. It was Sunday, her one day to sleep in. But she was probably up already, making coffee, knowing Sergio would be home in a few hours. Sergio didn't realize how homesick he was. He had been the whole time until just then. It was when he started thinking about his grandmother. It was the first time he had ever been away from home. And he'd only agreed to go at all because his grandma was so proud of him. 5 kids from New York State had been chosen to be honored at this ceremony at the University of Chicago, all based on one math test they had taken at the end of last year. And for that, Sergio had been flown to Chicago, put up in a hotel, and given 3 meals a day. And when they had called his name, his full name, Sergio Kincaid Williams, he had walked across that gigantic stage of the Court Theater and received his plaque, which was now weighing down his carry-on bag as he perused the night newsstand. Kincaid was his father's last name, of his father that was pretty much all he wanted to know. "You getting anything to eat?" the red-headed boy asked when they got up into the checkout line. Sergio slipped his hand into his jeans pocket to feel the $20 bill his grandmother had given him 3 days ago. He didn't want to break it if he didn't have to. "Don't they give us lunch or breakfast or something on the plane?" "Yeah, but they won't give us Kit Kat bars." The boy with the red hair put 2 candy bars on the counter. Sergio shook his head. "Nah, I'm good." They finished checking out and the boy handed Sergio one of the Kit Kats. "I hate to eat alone," he said. "Thanks." Sergio took the candy. He wasn't expecting that. It was nice. The red-headed boy began to unwrap his candy and then stopped. He appeared to be more interested in something across the store. "That is so weird, isn't it?" he said. He pointed. "What's she got on her head?" Sergio tried to figure out what the boy was talking about, but didn't see anything. "What's weird? Who?" "Her!" The boy gestured across the news shop to a girl with her back toward them, facing a full wall of magazines. She was wearing regular clothes, jeans and a sweater, but her head was wrapped in a shawl, a thin brown veil. Sergio knew what that meant. She was Muslim. There were a lot of Muslim girls in his neighborhood and in his school, but this kid probably had never seen anyone dressed like that. He was from way upstate New York somewhere. At that moment, the girl turned toward them as if she had heard them talking. Her headscarf completely covered her head and neck all the way down to her shoulders. Like a child's drawing, her pale face was floating in a sea of brown fabric. Her lips pressed together, her brow furrowed. Her eyes were blue like the Mediterranean Sea. "Hey man, let's go," Sergio said. It was not cool to stare. Nahid was used to it, being looked at. She was used to people asking if she was wearing a costume or saying, "I didn't know you were Arab. Can you belly dance? Do you believe in God? Do you really not eat for a month?" She wasn't Arab. She was Middle Eastern. Well, she was American, born 12 years ago in Columbus, Ohio, and she had never lived anywhere else. She had never once been to Iran, where her Persian mother and father had grown up. She couldn't belly dance either. But she was used to people staring at her as soon as she left her house, her neighborhood, her school, her friends, and was out in public. As she was here in O'Hare Airport, waiting for her uncle and aunt to arrive. Their flight hadn't come in yet. Nahid's family could have just waited outside for Uncle Iman and Aunt Judith to go through security and baggage, but her dad wanted to be right at the gate when his brother got off the plane, so they had gotten to the airport early. Really early. They had already had snacks, gone to the bathroom, and wandered through all the gift shops, and Uncle Iman's plane was still not there. "Why don't you get yourself a magazine?" Nahid's father offered. "One I would have approved of," he quickly added. Nahid gazed at the display wall. There were hundreds of magazines, all with exciting, colorful covers, pretty girls, beautiful clothing, and lots of bare skin. But there wasn't one magazine on the wall her father would let her buy. The girls with their hair blowing freely all around their heads like someone had a fan right in their faces, their bare arms showing, even though they were advertising winter fashions. Nahid knew it was immodest. A girl does not need to flaunt her beauty to the real world, her mother had told her many times. Real beauty is inside, and the right boy will see that. Nahid decided she didn't need anything after all. She turned to head back to her family, only now there were people everywhere, filling the news shops, heading in all directions, strolling, rushing, dragging children in bags, but nowhere did she see her mother's or father's or little sister's familiar face. Her father had been standing right there a minute ago. Hadn't he? Nahid looked straight ahead in the direction she had just come from. Or was it that way? Or there? They all looked the same. There were faces everywhere, but no one she knew. Her heart started to pump more quickly, and she felt the heat filling up her body. A tiny bead of sweat formed instantly across her forehead. How would she ever find them? She could feel tears springing into the corners of her eyes. There were people all around her, too many people, too many faces. She didn't want to start crying, but it was about to happen anyway. She kept walking, looking down at the ground, hoping her feet would keep working, even if her brain wasn't. In this way, she banged directly into something solid, unmoving, and talking. "Hey, watch where you're going." Nahid looked up. It was so weird. For a second, it seemed that a girl from one of those magazines had actually stepped out and was right here in front of her. Light brown hair, long and straight, carefully pulled away from her face and delicate neck. She had perfect skin and a perfect outfit, white t-shirt with some kind of logo tucked into her belted jeans. "Oh no, now look what happened," the girl said. The impact of the two bodies had sent the girl's bag spilling onto the floor. Chapstick, a water bottle, Walkman, and a plastic change purse, unfortunately not quite tightly closed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Now surely Nahid was going to cry. She began to bend down next to the girl to help her when she saw across the way her little sister, Nori, waving her arms. Here, here, Nori was saying. Nahid felt a wave of comfort pour over her. Her mind cleared, her heart slowed with relief, then sped back up with joy. She hadn't lost them. There was her family standing by the far window. The plane had just arrived. Uncle Iman and Aunt Judith were a welcome sight. Nahid stopped trying to collect the girl's things. She stood up. "Oh, never mind," the girl said, wisps of her hair now loose and falling into her eyes as she gathered her things from the floor. "I got it." Thanks, Nahid called back. Sorry. But her voice was absorbed into the airport terminal din. Amy grabbed for the loose coin that was standing upright and rolling across the floor, but it got away. She didn't feel like chasing it. She let her mind glaze over watching the nickel or dime or quarter or whatever it was turn like a wheel to the left, to the right, and left again before it finally toppled over and a man's thick black shoe stepped right on it. Then he went on his way without noticing. "Amy, what are you doing on the floor?" her mother asked. "You know I'm in a rush." Amy knew that. Her mother needed to hurry to catch her flight. Amy and her dad were going to Los Angeles, but her mom at the last minute had to go to New York for a meeting. Her new job meant that last minute happened a lot. It meant nights and sometimes even weekends. And sometimes Amy just wished her mom's new job had never happened. "Do you have to go?" Amy could hear herself whining, but she couldn't help it. She was starting 7th grade tomorrow in a new school in a new town, and to make matters worse, a week later than everyone else because of the bat mitzvah. She might have still been whining about that, except her cousin's bat mitzvah had been so much fun. Amy's family had already sold their house, so for the weekend at the bat mitzvah, they got to stay at the Drake Hotel. Amy could have stayed down the hall with her other out-of-town cousins, all girls about her age, but she chose to stay with her parents, like she used to when she was little, and they would go away on vacation. If there were 2 queen-size beds in the room, she would make her parents sleep separately so that one night she could sleep with one and the next night the other. Her favorite vacation was when they went to the Magic Kingdom in Orlando, and there was only one king bed. She slept right in the middle with her mother and father on either side of her. This time at the Drake Hotel, they ordered a rollaway brought to the room, but it felt nearly as good. At the bat mitzvah party, when they went back to their rooms, all the decorative pillows had been taken off the king bed and the covers were turned down into a perfect triangle. Even her little rollaway had been folded down neatly, set up for her just to climb right in and go to sleep. There were 2 tiny wrapped chocolates on all their pillows. Amy knew she was too old to want to be sleeping in the same room with her parents, but she couldn't help it. She hated it when her mother was about to leave on a business trip. But now as her mother kissed her goodbye and left, Amy didn't say anything. She didn't want to start crying. She waved as she watched her mother getting farther and farther away. There was still time. She could run after her mother and stop her from leaving. In her mind, Amy played out the scene. She would catch up in a few seconds before her mother could turn around at the sound of Amy's sneakers. Amy would wrap her arms around her mother's waist and hold tight, really tight. They would stay that way for a few moments, hugging, not having to say anything because there would be nothing to say. "I love you, Mama Lay." "I love you too, Amy Lay." And then her mother would get on the plane. Wouldn't get on the plane. She'd stay home with Amy and they would bake cookies. Amy could still make it now if she ran fast. She even felt the energy tingle in her toes, but she didn't run. And then poof, the moment was gone. And now there was a stranger, a woman, and 2 little girls hiding behind their mother's legs, talking to Amy's dad. And there was a boy standing beside the mom, looking embarrassed but protective. "Excuse me," the mother was saying. "Yes," Amy's father answered. "I'm sorry, but do you have the time?" Of course. Amy's dad looked at his watch and told her the time. At the same time, he reached over and gave Amy a squeeze. He knew she needed it. The woman said, "Thank you," and she and her 3 kids headed off somewhere in a big hurry. When Amy looked back down the corridor, her mother was gone. Maybe it was the way the dad put his arm around the girl when he was looking at his watch, or maybe it was how the girl kind of looked like Claire a little bit. They had the same color hair, and Claire wore hers that way too. She was about the same height. But maybe it was just the way the dad was being so attentive to his kids that Will noticed. And he felt a tiny, sharp pain in his throat. "You didn't need to bother that man," Will said when they had walked past. "There's the time, Mom, right up there on that board," he pointed. I know, but I just wanted to double check," his mother said, "just to make sure." Will and his 2 sisters, Rooney and Callie, followed their mother through the airport. He wished his mother didn't get so nervous. He really wished she didn't ask strangers for help all the time. And that had nothing to do with his dad dying or the way he got killed. Died or killed. Will wasn't sure because he still didn't have the right words to explain his father's death, to make sense of any of it, to even think about it. No, his mom had always been like that, talking to anyone, thinking that the universe took care of you as if all you had to do was ask nicely. She acted as if she really believed in this world, people in this world cared about other people, and she would actually stick their necks out just because she did that for other people, because that was the right thing to do, or because that's how their dad had always done things. "Come on, kids." Will's mother was doing her speed walking thing through the terminal. "We have to hurry." This trip to Florida hadn't been such a good idea all around, but what could they do? It had been given to them, everything, including tickets to Disney World, all paid for a gift of healing from the town of Shanksville. A bunch of his parents' friends had decided the family needed to get away on the anniversary, if you could call it that. The whole town practically had raised the money quietly and not so quietly through bake sales and donations and gifts, so that when they presented the trip to Will's mom, what could she say? No? No, thank you. The family and I don't want to have fun anymore. The lines at Disney World had been so long, the wait sometimes more than an hour, and it had been hot. Callie fell asleep and their mother ended up carrying her through most of the Magic Kingdom. She looked like a limp doll, a sweaty, limp doll. Rooney cried after each ride because she wanted to go again, but you couldn't do that. Life doesn't work that way, not even in the Magic Kingdom. The trip began to feel like a burden. It was a chore to be happy, even though sometimes in spite of themselves, they were happy. Like when Callie jumped into the pool and made it all the way to the other side by herself, or when the French waitress at Epcot brought them a dessert meant for another table but told them they could keep it anyways. They took 4 spoons and dug in, not having any idea what it was. Dad would have loved this, Rooney said, scraping the last of the rich, creamy pudding from the bowl with her finger. Daddy loved cinnamon, their mother added. And they all got quiet again. By the end of the long weekend, they were all exhausted. They were 58 minutes early to their connecting flight home, Orlando to Chicago. Now Chicago to Pittsburgh. The waiting area was practically empty. Will's sisters both laid their heads down on their mom's lap. Will pulled a watch out of his pocket. It wasn't one of those new cool watches that told the temperature and what time it was all over the world. It was just a plain Timex and an old, really worn yellow and blue striped fabric band. But it had been his dad's watch. The only thing Will had specifically asked for. When Will was little, his dad had used to let him wind it, pulling out the tiny stem and turning the metal knob carefully to not to overwind, mindful as well never to let it stop completely. Will held the watch in his hand and looked down at the white face, the black Roman numerals in the skinny second hand ticking forward in a steady jerking beat. It was 10:03 exactly. All right, and that's where it stops for that day. So the next part is 9/10 or September 10th. So I'm actually very, very interested in this story. I want to know what happens to each one of them, how their lives are affected by this date. So I will probably continue reading this. And if you're interested, don't forget that you can check this out very easily, either going online at evpl.org to place a hold, or you could give us a call, or you can even come into one of our locations and check out a copy that way. All right, so I'm going to pause our recording so that we can get our wheel so that we can see what are we reading next time. All right, so I'll be right back. All right, so we are ready to spin our wheel so that we can see what we're reading next time. And I did forget to mention that with our book 9/10, we have it as a print copy. We also have it available as an e-audiobook so that if you prefer listening to a story, then you can always check it out that way too. All right, so we have our topics: science fiction, historical fiction, humor, fantasy, spooky, mystery, realistic fiction, adventure. So if we do happen to land on something that we've done recently, I will probably spin again just so that we can get some variety. That's the whole point. All right, so here we go. Ooh, fantasy. All right, so next time we are together, we will be reading a story that is a fantasy book. So that's exciting. All right, so I hope you have enjoyed today's story time. Don't forget, you can always go to evpl.org to check out all of our resources, whether that is our events like Chapter Book Storytime and other virtual programs that we have, but also you can see what other things we have coming up, and you can check out our collection to see what you would like to take home to read for your next story. So thank you again for joining us. I hope to see you again soon next Friday. Bye.